Testing. Yeah.
Okay, so again, my name is Adrian Auler. I'm an ERIE member. And I suppose I should have mentioned, although I suppose everybody here knows what ERIE is, but for the sake of formality, ERIE is an acronym standing for Entheogenic Research, Integration, and Education. We are a student group at CIIS, largely from the East-West Psychology Department, but we have new members joining us from other departments as well. Okay, so I'm going to begin by reading a short statement that I prepared. The primary focus of integration thus far from our two speakers has centered around integrating the consequences of entheogenic experiences, which is very important and of course is central to ERIE. But we adopt a larger vision, and I'm just going to reference that at this time for the sake of expanding the horizons of your considerations. Then we'll return to specifically discussing elaborations on the presentations of these two gentlemen. I have come to see integration as the central unifying theme of the new worldview, as opposed to deconstructive analysis, which is the theme of the old reductionist materialist worldview. The operative function of the new paradigm is both and, whereas either or is the operative function of the old paradigm. The many possible understandings and applications of integration bespeak the multidimensional, holographic, fractal characteristics of the cosmos. These perspectives have been revealed to us most recently by quantum physics and mathematical chaos theory. I would like to offer some possible application-specific definitions of integration. Integration may be applied to the interior experience of individual humans. When this refers to their conscious experience, it is part of the individuation process and falls within the scope of psychology. When it refers to proper function of their organs and tissues within their physical organism, it falls under the rubric of medicine. When integration is applied to the daily interactive relationship between individuals and their community, it refers to harmonizing the group members to create peaceful coexistence, and falls within the disciplines of sociology and law. Or, if applied to the relationship of an individual's health in reference to their community, it falls under the discipline of medical anthropology. When integration is applied to relationships between people and the natural environment, it is a function of the effort to create compatible reciprocity among all life forms and the planet, and is addressed by chaos theory, ecology, and ecopsychology. At the highest level, integration implies finding a meaningful relationship to the cosmos and reality in service to the cause of achieving inner peace. It is then an ontological investigation which also influences one's epistemological practices. Thus, I see the operative dynamic of integration expressed repeatedly from the micro to the macro level in accordance with the principles of life in a fractal holographic cosmos. So as you can see, integration can be applied at various levels in different ways and is a unifying theme for the entire new worldview that we're moving into. And now, let us return to specifically integrating entheogenic experience with our guest speakers, Gnosis and Dr. Howard Whitehouse. Howie, when you were speaking, I took some notes. You referred to profane initiation, and I think you used a military context, but I was also thinking of some articles I've seen referring to gangs, and there is an effort to create rites of passage, rites of initiation, but in a very profane sort of manner. And in both of those, it does not lead to ego death, but the reinforcement of a kind of specialized ego. Do you care to respond to that or elaborate further?
You know, the gangs is very good. That's if you come down one less formal, institutionalized, you get this kind of more spontaneous formation in the inner cities, and you know, Joanna Macy comes to mind when she said that the more we exploit the third world nations abroad, the more our inner cities are going to turn into the exact reflection of that exploitation. And I think, you know, I was thinking we're modeling this violence abroad. Now, who wouldn't think that it would be acted out at home? I mean, it's ridiculous that you would think that that's what would happen. So, you know, I'm not surprised at all, because this is the models we're providing, you know, very explicitly, you know, to anybody who gets the media hitting them, you know, and the younger people that are thinking about, you know, how they could fit in to something that's fragmented are going to be very vulnerable at that moment, and they're going to pick up on what's available, you know. Make 100 times more per hour selling drugs, and then they find themselves in the middle of this ordeal, you know. So, you know, it's you know, Richard Wolff does a good, he's an economist, and he does a good critique on how capitalism, the structural violence of capitalism, how it ends up being a psychological reality that we're living in. His wife, Harriet Freud, is very good with how does that affect people in this culture living, you know, in that context. And I think Gabramante was here, and he was talking about how the environment causes the intra-psychic illnesses that we have. It's never disconnected from that, you know. And so there's a dialogue always happening between, you know, these structures outside. You know, you have the gangs, you have, you know, marriage systems breaking down, you have job structures breaking down, you have just a competition going, you know, for resources that we're having to branch out for, and so there's a lot of ways you could look at different addictions that come out, you know. In a sense, you know, you could be addicted to any of these. Work as a way to kind of just embed yourself in your life. Gangs, join a corporation, you know. There's a lot of ways to kind of occupy yourself, you know, so that you know, you want to look at the larger whole, because it's breaking down all around. So.
Well, just to make the obvious point that the lack of cultural initiation, I think, is, you know, part of what draws us so much to working with entheogens, because it offers that. It offers this path into the hero's journey and into you know, transforming ourselves and coming out on the other side as something completely different. And because our culture isn't providing context for that, other than, like you discussed, in these ways that really seem imbalanced. I personally, you know, have a vision of, you know, people recreating spiritual tradition, or reinventing spiritual tradition in a way that isn't in that initiatory process, that isn't hierarchical and religious in the sense, and dogmatic in the way that religions are, but that involves communities coming together and, you know, creating sangha and initiating each other and supporting each other through that. So.
Exactly. That's kind of the way it was back in the day during the Cultural Revolution. None of us had any kind of guides, but we were, among other things, creating community by taking these consciousness-expanding substances together and feeling ourselves to have an identity within the larger context of the mainstream society.
Yes. Just to make can I just make a quick comment? Just to again keep in mind the heroic journey. Traditionally was more part of the adolescent initiation into adulthood. The initiate, you know, that's what Jung was talking about. The initiation is not about the heroic enactment but it's more about the surrender, which is a different way to fight. You know, it's kind of more Gandhian fight. So there's, you know, you got to figure what's the appropriate response. You know, sometimes a heroic response is necessary, but in many cases it's not. It's just something we know from the past. So there are, well, the first thing in martial arts is you step back.
Right.
You know, and you don't engage. So that's one way to think about it. What is necessary? You know, that's the difference between being able to start with the heroic and the initiation, you know, of the adept, let's say.
We have a question over there.
Yes, sir.
I think an example recently of a profane initiation on the macro scale that you're talking about is the killing of Osama bin Laden. It sets up everybody in the West, and particularly in the quote-unquote American country, as a participant in a process whereby they enter more fully and in a more committed way to a war on terror or a war on, you know, other. And this has been really a very, very profane and powerful initiation that people have been offered.
Sort of a willy-nilly vicarious initiation, like it or not.
Well, yeah, it's not very vicarious. It's a full participation.
It's not very vicarious. We're participating
Well, I mean,
fully
only a
in this.
handful of people actually were present
Yeah,
to
but
kill.
it's the giant symbolic act, which then
Right.
we invest ourselves in a new level, supposedly, of power as a group, and then we now are going to go after the dark other,
Right.
you know?
So the concept of an antiodromia comes to mind, where we have become the terrorists we're theoretically supposed to be fighting against. So how you also talked about negotiating between the sacred and the profane, those two levels, and it occurred to me that there was a congruence with Sri Aurobindo's integral philosophy of journeying out, and as your nice little mandala showed, journeying out to get the non-dual experience, to expand your consciousness, to bring back the fruits of your journey, but then to enact those fruits, to integrate them not only into your own life, but into the profane society, to sacralize the profane society around you by your own example.
Yeah, where the chart. The little thing there about the interrelational realm. Really, there's like a lateral extension of yourself. So you're coming back to yourself, embodiment, and then as Carl said, you're coming back to the community. You're coming back to an awareness of the environment. So think of the extension as that's kind of a lateralness going out into the world. So now, if I'm going to act in the world, what do I do? Do I do that with a memory of what I've experienced and bring something, you know, in the form of art, in the form of beauty, in the form of something that has an intrinsic value back into the world, or will I just participate in the next, you know, fragmented, broken dream? You know, so you have choices. You can at least start to decide. I myself started deciding, you know, that I enjoy making art, and that I really enjoy doing that, and somehow that's become a vehicle for some of these images, these ideas to come out. You know, where, you know, I can own that. I could start and finish it without having to be dependent on anybody. But it's a lonely process. You know, you have to kind of work with that yourself. You know,
Right.
Sometimes a group project. I don't know if my friend Richard's here, but we did a piece together that we're going to show at the International Cafe on Haight Street. So sometimes you get to work with another artist, but I think that's kind of rare.
Yeah. Carl?
Well, yeah, I mean, that creative impulse you're talking about, I feel like that is really, for me, that's the embodiment of these experiences, is finding a way of, you know, taking something that's so out there and bringing it back here. And for me, that's what doing video work is about, is, you know, whatever clarity, whatever visions I've had, finding a way of then sharing that and helping other people. For me, it's like helping other people to find some clarity, to find some kind of connection And yeah, I mean that seems like maybe the ultimate integration of these experiences really is how do you share it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we can experiencing something on our own and it can be profound, but when we like that's part of what this is about for me here tonight is like sharing something that is very personal in the same way that the video work I do is sharing a piece of myself that is I feel like I want to get out into the world. It's like during the journeys it's like, oh wow, like I'm like bringing this creature through from another dimension and it's like filling me with this potential information and I just have to release that into the world.
This is where the arts, I mean, you can, it sounds a little cliche, but it's like, artful living, I mean, really is bringing something of beauty back in. It's kind of where I made the connection with the arts. I said, feeling that you're bringing something of the sublime, the sublime was an interesting thing to learn about for me because it was not just the beauty, but it was, something of the dark side too, the sublime, so you're able to hold both those things. And the authors that I was looking at, a lot of them are saying that it does come back to a narrative or a storytelling. And in a way, that's what we're living with as a story here.
I believe we have a question in the audience.
Yeah, So I wanted to know, we're talking about integrating and we're talking about some very deep spaces that people are entering. I wanted to know what kind of tools or what advice you would have for people who may have gone to these deeper, darker places and found some very traumatic body experiences to where going back to that or trying to integrate that isn't safe because those experiences, they weren't safe in their body. Maybe severe sexual trauma or child abuse, assaults, rapes, violence, stuff like that, that may have been dissociated from at the time, but then going into these deeper mind states have touched it. So what kind of tools do you suggest? What can we use as guides for friends or for ourselves in integrating those kind of experiences?
Sure.
If you don't talk, I'm gonna.
Well, I've had a few friends who have worked with psychedelics specifically to heal that kind of trauma relating to abuse, childhood abuse, sexual abuse. And I'd say that the most important thing is to have really close allies in your life that you can share with completely, that you just have the deepest trust and can explore whatever needs to come up. I think without those allies, doing psychedelic work with that kind of trauma can be really dangerous. I mentioned briefly a friend of mine in college who did a lot of LSD and ended up in a mental hospital, and it took him 7 years because he didn't have, once he left college, he didn't have allies and friends. It took him 7 years to finally find a partner who was really supportive, who he could share with in a really deep way, and he finally uncovered after 7 years this buried trauma that he had totally repressed, and then has been using mushrooms to really heal and reintegrate and come back into the community, and now is doing really great. But it took both intentional medicine work with mushrooms and this partner of his who was just the most solid ally he could possibly have.
This is one of the reasons that I found one of the components that I would suggest to have in place prior to going into any deep work with the medicines in particular would be to have a guide that knows that route, because sometimes you might not know when you're opening up some of these amnesic places, and so if you don't go into the process with someone that you trust as a guide, friends are definitely agree with you to have a community and some friends, but someone that knows the terrain in the form of being either an indigenous guide that's trained to do it or a Western guide, but someone that's there in case, because you don't always know what you're going to open up, because the medicine does take you to where you need to go, and sometimes those are places that you couldn't anticipate. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thus the value of the traditional shamanic container, where there's an experienced shaman who will know how to handle these things. In fact, he'll see them coming, and he'll have an ikaro to sing to help you, or whatever the case may be. So as Carl already pointed out, while there's obviously a great deal of potential value to be had, it's nothing to be trifled with. And if you're not using a traditional shamanic container, then you have to create a container of your own with your own sangha, your own crowd of people that you feel trust, that you're able to trust, and or it's good to know resources of therapeutic community, places you can go, spiritual emergence network, things like that, so that you have resources, because oftentimes things are uncovered that we've completely suppressed and or never known in the first place, so that it can be a nasty surprise. It's something that you need, that we all need to heal, but we'll probably need help. So it occurred to me that in this in your discussion, in your mandala, that we could consider this process of attempting to achieve a plateau as kind of a two-cycle process. Using directional metaphor, it's hard to get away from. We go vertically with our exploration, and then we express and work horizontally to ground, if you will, ourselves and the process, and bring the fruits of our exploration to our community. So it's good for us and good for those around us.
You know, I like that metaphor, because it's it kind of counteracts the narcissism in a way. You know, because okay, you do the vertical, you go deep into the shadow. That's what you get for going vertical.
Mm-hmm.
Get deeper into that unconscious shadow and the collective shadow. But then it gets you away from yourself when you go vertical in what you're suggesting, and I think that's true. You start to realize that there's other people around here, there's other things that need to be tended to.
Yeah, and that expresses the time-honored principle of service.
Yes.
Humble, self-effacing service.
We have another question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I did not have the benefit of a trustworthy community of any kind. When I began working with psychedelics, I had one of those difficult character disorders. And one of the results of that was poor discernment as who I became involved with as friends. Well, the individual I would drop with the most trained under none other than Jim Jones for 11 years and used his techniques on my mind while I was on 300 to 400 mics of LSD. He would take 100. Well, I had to take so many more because I was so defensive. Well, I was protected by God. I mean, I was in a very dangerous situation. I later had an experience. This individual was on 100 mics, and I didn't know it. I wasn't on any. Something entered me. In the Gospels, when it talks about being possessed by an unclean spirit, that actually happened to me. And the demonic realm is able to use psychedelics. And I was protected by God. If I wasn't, I wouldn't be in this room coherent to talk about it. I would be wandering the streets eating out of garbage cans. Now, I don't recommend anyone undertake work with psychedelics in the context that in terms of the people I was around. That's not to say that, oh, it doesn't matter, God will protect you. I mean, that's what happened to me. I was very blessed. And my work with psychedelics, most of it was in the 80s. It was the most radically constructive work I've ever done with my life. I was able to fundamentally change my character. Later in the work, I did find a trustworthy shrink I could work with. He was experienced with psychedelics. That was a requirement as far as I was concerned. But anyway, I'll just stop with that. I don't know how anyone would get that kind of protection from God without intent. That's all I had.
Well, to be quite honest with you, what comes up for me in my, from my perspective, that, you know, you might agree or disagree, but I'll throw it out there, but that you protected yourself in whatever dimension you were at. Calling it God, I have no problem with that, you know, as far as, but I would bring it in one step closer and saying that some part of you was awakened, that God had, that spirit, whatever in you, was awakened enough to be able to get a perspective on so, you know, it's a matter of, you know, a dualistic religion or a non-dual, and I'm just kind of suggesting from a non-dual perspective that you guided yourself, and, you know, to own that one too, you know, as far as putting it in the dualistic, you know, God and the other thing, but it seems like that was awake, that was activated enough so that you saw your way through it. I mean, it's pretty cool.
Something that came up for me in what you just said was how important it is, if you are working with a human guide with this kind of, in this kind of medicine, is to have someone that you really trust. You know, I've had experiences of, you know, going on journeys with people who thought I trusted, but, you know, didn't. You know, you can really, like you're saying, feeling like something jumps over and like almost possesses you. Like I've experienced things sort of like that. If, you know, I mean, people talk about working with shamans in South America, and like really gnarly stuff can happen if you don't choose the right person. You know, I mean, like, you know, vet your shaman, I guess is the message. You know, I mean, there's risks to doing solo work, and there's huge risks to doing work with shamans that you haven't really checked out. I mean, there's like this huge problem with sexual abuse happening with shamans in South America right now too, and like what a horrible thing, right? To go for healing and to get even further abused by somebody, but it's happening.
I was hearing that they're running cocaine now along the Amazon River, and so the drug agents from, you know, that part of the world are on boats now, armed, and they're trying to intercept the cocaine that's being run on the Amazon River. Well, I started thinking they're going to probably be interacting with some of these ayahuasca tours coming down there. You know, I go, this is not a good scene.
No.
You know, so, you know, I just heard this I think last night on the radio. You know, they're talking about what's going on now, because it's easier for them to get the cocaine out on the Amazon than it is going up. They're taking these planes and knocking them out of the air. So, you know, so they're doing the riverboat trip. So yeah, be careful which tour you sign up for. You know, get a map first. You know.
And to close this, I'm reminded of an instruction of Don Juan to Carlos Castaneda, that when you are able to gain access to the other realm has access to you. So you have to know what you're doing. We have a new question.
Thanks. I have a question for Carl. Okay, can you hear me?
A little louder.
Okay. So I really like what you said, to embody the experience there, to here. But my experience with the journey is like I've been taken away by something much bigger than me, much powerful. So in my mind, I cannot really imagine if I bring that experience to here, how is my body is going to be able to hold it. And also what's the consciousness will be experienced like here rather than there, like the surrender sense. So if you can talk more about that.
This is we were talking about. This is the thing. You take the infinite, by definition, you can't fit it into the part. So there's always going to be a frustration in the sense that you can't totally integrate these two realms, because the infinite realm, and you may have gone into it. You know, some of the medicine brings you there, and you can't possibly fit everything into one thing. So there's a compromise in a sense that needs to be made. And this is, I think, what the vocation comes in, you know, saying, okay, what is my call? Since I can't do everything all the time for everybody, and not responsible for that huge, you know, endeavor, what is the particular thing that I feel can hold that larger vision that I had in the work that I do? Now that to me would be a legitimate question to pose to oneself when they're trying to bring back something. You know, otherwise, what you're literally doing is reproducing the Godhead. You know, you're taking the whole and creating a second one, which would be problematic because now you have dualism again. You know what I mean? You have two holes that are both reflecting each other. They'll probably end up getting into a battle in some kind. So you want to just find something that fits you. You know, that's where your creativity and your individual nature should be, you know, actualized. That what feels right. That it's the right track. And you know, talking about Adrian Auler, he said, you know, how do you know a path that's hard? Well, you feel one with it as you're transversing it. You know, and if the path doesn't have heart, you feel it. You feel if you don't like waking up at 7 o'clock and running to the office, and you know what I mean. You feel these things at some level. You know, you feel. You know, I mean, you know, what is the work that I want to do? Do I want to sit in front of a computer all day, or do I want to work in a garden in the park? You know what I mean? So this is where your idiosyncratic, you know, really does have a play, because you can't do everything. You can't bring the infinite into the part. You have to kind of resolve yourself to picking a direction. You know, that's my sense of when I was grappling with that very thing, and did a little writing about it. And I said, okay, finally, you have to make choices. You know, that's the existential throne that you find, you know, you're thrown into the world in a body with choices that need to be made. That helps.
I mean, that's really right on. I had a little different way of conceiving of it, but basically, you know, echoing what you just said, I feel like those transcendent experiences of all of that, it's as if, you know, like one enzyme in one cell of our body were to gain awareness of our whole body, you know, and that magnitude of experience. So it's like and we are like those enzymes. And it's, for me, it's been about really tuning into what kind of enzyme am I, you know? And that's where, again, the physical practice of really exploring the physical body, really like every, you know, in whatever way that works for you, and getting in touch with who you are as a physical creature, and then knowing what feels right. I feel very strongly that what feels right to us, as you're saying, like where our heart is leading us, what feels good, is really what we're meant to be doing. And you know, it's difficult because the society we live in doesn't always offer the right roles or opportunities that feel good in general. So that, again, is part of the integration, is seeing how to fit back into society or not. You know, I think it's a perfectly legitimate path to leave, you know, if something here isn't working for you, and like go off and, you know, have a permaculture farm, you know, and like do something totally different if that's what really feels right. Or, but within the culture, or create a new role, you know, create a new job description for yourself, you know, or just really tune into what, if it is something that exists that works for you, what feels good, what you love.
And certainly a consistent consequence of powerful transformative experiences is that people may find that what they've been doing in the world is inauthentic and does not really serve their greater personal need, and they suddenly do a complete about-face and change their engagement in the world altogether. So you may have been a corporate office worker, and suddenly you feel you need to be guiding people on upward bound journeys in the Rockies, or something, or you start a garden or something like that. Now, I will offer a slight different perspective, Howie, in keeping with the fractal nature of the cosmos, and the statement of many spiritual paths that we are, the divine is within us, and somebody said the kingdom of God is within, and whatnot. Ultimately, we are potentially one with the Godhead. But here at this plane, we're all on a soul journey, and whatever comes to you, if you follow your bliss, whatever comes to you as what you can do now is what will best open you up and expand you, so that in the next time you take incarnation, you will be that much further ahead and able to do that much more. But to burden yourself with guilt that you should do more than you actually feel that you can do, that would be succumbing to the profane society around you. Spirit knows what's best for you, and your soul knows what's best for you, and that will come to you as a sense of calling, a sense of mission. And that's what you should do, as much as you can, and no more. And always try to be pushing the boundaries, do as much as you can, and maybe just a hair more, but not too much more. Don't hurt yourself. But in that way, you will be able to, if you have some vast vision, you can't express that vast vision in the world. Express the part of it that you can, and because it's fractal in nature, the part actually contains, by implication, the rest of the vision.
You have the last question over here.
Yes, sir.
That was a great part to leave off on, because that was actually a segue to my question, which has more to do with the fractal octave part in the synopsis on the meetup, because I mean, we obviously all know about fractal geometry being, what constitutes our reality, but whoever wrote the synopsis, I'm curious as to where the octave part came in. Or what's your take on that personally?
My own personal experience has been of, there's different ways of thinking about dimension, right? And one way of thinking about dimension is literally sort of about size or scale that you're at. And when I speak about the enzymes inside of our body relating to our whole body, and then we as enzymes relating to the larger body that we're a part of, it's like octaves of the same pattern, but at a different scale. And one of the things that I find that working with entheogens has done for me is allowed me to zoom up and down through those dimensions, like I'm going up and down like a musical scale, really. So that's what I meant by.
Okay, we have a little time left here.
There's one more question.
Oh, yes. Yes,
Hi. It seems to me that often in entheogenic circles there's a bit of a bias towards naturally occurring compounds. So mushrooms get a lot of attention, ayahuasca gets a lot of attention. But I wouldn't say they're demonized, but synthetic compounds are sort of neglected. And I'm wondering if you could speak about your opinions on the vast amount of synthetic compounds that can also be used for personal exploration and for spiritual growth, and why you, if you do, why you prefer a naturally occurring substance like mushrooms over a synthetic compound like LSD.
Well, I myself would I don't really prefer one over the other. What I would demand for both of them was knowing what is the compound is. That's all. I think that's one of the advantages of organic. I didn't have to worry about the compound when we were using synthetic. That I took that into consideration. So I don't really have a bias one way or the other. If people know what they're doing, and so that's one thing I would say.
I probably have a little bit of a bias, to be honest. And it really just has to do with how safe something is, and how toxic something is, and how long has it been in use. And all the synthetics have only been in use, for a few decades, really, if that. Some of the newer stuff is like being created, it's like there's no time to test it for safety, for long-term effects. And I know people who use these things to great benefit, so it's not like I think that they're bad. I just feel that it's for my own personal biochemistry, it's just such a huge unknown. It's a huge risk to take to introduce these things into your system. Whereas mushrooms have been used for thousands and thousands of years, and and ayahuasca as well, and peyote and all these other things, and so that to me always just felt more right for me. I'd say additionally, I'm not sure this is, I guess I can kind of say this as a general rule. I find that the naturally occurring medicines tend to, in my own personal experience and in observations I made of other people, tend to be more embodied, or at least it's easier to embody those experiences. And the people I've known who have been the most blasted out there and unable to like get back here, it tends to be synthetics that do that. In my own personal experience, like this is not an exhaustive research study I've done, but just data I've collected. So those two reasons have, I've certainly tried various synthetics and had some great, amazing experiences with them. So it's not like I think they're bad. I would, but if I was going to be counseling somebody who didn't really know much about this, I would just make sure to say those things. Like, yes, these are available, and they have not really been tested over long periods of time, and they are, like MDMA, for example. Robert Forte, who spoke here at a symposium a while back, made the point that MDMA is like by far more like the most toxic entheogen, compared to mushrooms and ayahuasca and peyote and all these things, like LSD. So it's just good to know that, to be well informed.
And I would say that the natural or the traditional plant-based medicines are the ones that seem to possess plant teacher, an actual entity, a consciousness that comes with them and can teach you things that can guide you in your experience, whereas LSD and similar synthetic substances are more, I think Groff called them non-specific psychic amplifiers. So a great deal of work can be done with them. I just think that it means that you're thrown back on your own resources more. Whatever happens in your journey is going to depend more upon your own starting position and the intent and goal that you hold in mind. And probably you also, you may require more support from your Sangha, your group, because sometimes plant teacher can guide you right through the difficult passages that you may be undertaking with a plant-based medicine. I've taken lots of acid myself, and so I'm not, and I didn't have a bad time. I'm not going to speak against it. It's just my feeling, and I don't think that this is an end to the question. It's just some discussion, and you have to continue your own contemplation and perhaps investigations on your own. But I think that at this time we are.
Can I just echo that very strongly? That's a really excellent point, that there is this difference. I've noticed very consistently that there's a teaching element with naturally occurring medicines. There's a guide there who you can let go into that experience and be safe.
I want to address that just for the fun of it, because in a dualistic perspective, I would say yes, but if we're going for a non-dual understanding of what it is to be taught and what it is to learn, there is an argument to be made for we are teaching ourselves, and I remember, and I'll use a saying from an old sage that I hit up on my refrigerator, that the whole world is medicine. And that resonated with me, because anything could be taken to be poison or anything could be taken as medicine. Know what you're doing. The awareness, intention is probably the thing to really know, because I don't know what happens to me when I ingest ayahuasca. I haven't the slightest idea what's going on in my brain chemistry. Something nobody that is a brain chemist, no medical doctor knows what is happening either. So we've got to admit what we don't know. Right. They could say, well, these 12 neurotransmitters out of the 300 that we think exist are being lit up, and some are blocking, and some are aggravating, and some are... you know, give me a break. You know, so we're experimenting here with the neo-shamanism. So do what you need to do, be safe, and do it with awareness, whatever you do.
Indeed. We could look at Alex Gray, who likes to work with, I think, 2CB, CB2 or whatever, some Shulgin, wonder drug, and look what he does. But then Alex was an artist, and that's his focus, and so he uses that particular entheogen as a vehicle to bring forth what he has within himself in any case. But at this point, I think we need to bring the evening to a close. I would like to thank Dr. Howard Whitehouse and Carl Gnosis for being our guests here and speaking to us tonight and enlightening us with their own researchers. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And ERIE has a little present, just a token for each of you for having come here. Some sage and some incense. So, and thank you for coming and actually making the event happen, because otherwise we'd be sitting here speaking to empty space. Thank you for your questions and your attention, and we hope that you'll come to more of our presentations. There'll be one in about 2 weeks on the 15th. So thank you, everybody, and good night.